Bento de Goes was a Portuguese Jesuit brother, missionary and explorer. His name is commonly given in English as Bento de Goes or Bento de Goes. In the past, it has also been anglicized as Benedict Goës. He is mainly remembered as the first known European to travel overland from India to China via Afghanistan and the Pamirs, inspired by controversies among the Jesuits as to whether the Cathay of Marco Polo's stories is the same country as China. His expedition conclusively proved that the two countries are one and the same, and, according to Henry Yule, made Cathay finally disappear from view, leaving China only in the mouths and minds of men. Biography. Early life. Goës went to Portuguese India as a soldier in the Portuguese army. In Goa he entered the Society of Jesus as a lay brother, offering himself to work for the Mughal mission. As such, in 1595, he accompanied Jerome Xavier and Manuel Pinheiro to Lahore. For the third time, Emperor Akbar had requested that Jesuits be sent to his court. Goës returned to Goa in 1601. According to Matteo Ricci, these experiences allowed Goës to become fluent in Persian language, and a good knowledge of Saracen customs. The riddle of Cathay. Goës is best remembered for his long exploratory journey through Central Asia under the garb of an Armenian merchant, in search of the kingdom of Cathay, generated by accounts made by Marco Polo, and later by the claims of Ruy González de Clavijo. Reports had been circulating in Europe for over 3 centuries of the existence of a Christian kingdom in the midst of Muslim nations. After the Jesuit missionaries, led by Matteo Ricci, had spent over 15 years in South China and finally reached Beijing in 1598, they came to strongly suspect that China is Cathay. This belief was strengthened by the fact that all Saracen travelers whom Ricci and his companions met in China told them that they are in Cathay. The Jesuit leadership in Goa had been informed by letters from Jesuits in China that China is Cathay. At the same time, the Jesuits stationed at the Mughal court were told by visiting merchants that one could reach Cathay via Kashgar, and that there were plenty of Christians in Cathay, which convinced Xavier that Cathay is, in fact, the kingdom of Prester John, rather than the Ming China. Christians in China and Mofulistan through the Yuan era. At the time when Goës' expedition was prepared, the most widely read account of Cathay in the Persian and Turkish-speaking Muslim world was perhaps the travelogue of Ghiyath al-Din Naqash from 1420 to 1422. It does not mention any Christians within the border of the Ming China, but some editions of it do mention infidels worshipping the cross in Turfan and Cumul. After some amount of communications between Xavier, the orders superiors in Goa, the father visitor was in charge there, and the authorities in Europe, it was decided to send an expedition overland from India to the Cathay, about which visitors to the Mughals Agra had told the Jesuits, to find out what the country really was. Goës was chosen as the most suitable person for this expedition, as a man of courage and good judgment, well familiar with the region's language and customs. Akbar approved of the plans as well. He issued Goës with letters of safe conduct to be used during the part of the trip within the Mughal Empire, and provided partial funding for the expedition. Goës goes to Cathay. Bento Goës left Agra for Lahore in late 1602 or early 1603, and in February 1603 he left Lahore with the annual caravan bound for Kashgari's capital Yarkand. His cover identity was that of an Armenian merchant with a somewhat unlikely name, Abdullah. He was accompanied by 2 Greeks chosen by Xavier, a priest named Leo Grimano and a merchant named Demetrius, who also separated from Bento in Kabul, but later rejoined him in Yarkand. Instead of the 4 servants given to him in Agra, in Lahore he hired a real Armenian residing in that city, named Isaac. Isaac went along with Goës until the very end. Traveling via Peshawar, the caravan reached Kabul, where the caravan members spent several months. While in Kabul, Goës met Aga Hanum, the sister of the ruler of Kashgaria, who was also the mother of the current ruler of Khotan. She was returning to her homeland from a Hajj to Mecca, and had run out of money. The Jesuit lent her some funds, which she later repaid with quality jade. From another traveler he met, Goës learned about the existence of a city called Kapistan, into which no Mohammedan is allowed to enter, and got a taste of kaffir wine, which he found quite similar to the European product. From Kabul, Bento de Goes and Isaac went north, crossing the Hindu Kush, having left the domain of the Moguls, and entered the territory under the authority of the Khan of Samarkand, Fergana, and Bukhara. They made a stop in Taloqan in today's northern Afghanistan. The area was in turmoil, with the Khalsia people, blonde, like the Belgians, being in rebellion against the Bukharan rulers. Having passed through the land of the Khalsia rebels with only minor losses, Bento's caravan continued eastward, on dangerous roads across the Pamirs. Neither Henry Yule in 1866, nor Cornelius Wessels in 1924 were able to identify most of the place names mentioned by Goës, but mentioned that this was probably the only published account of a European crossing the region between the expedition of Marco Polo and the 19th century. The caravan reached Yarkand in November 1603. Yarkand had been the capital of Kashgaria since the days of Abu Bakr Khan. Bento and Isaac spent a year there, waiting for the formation and departure of a caravan to Cathay. They knew that every few years a caravan like this would leave Yarkand, composed primarily of local merchants, carrying jade to the capital of Cathay under the guise of tribute to the Ming Emperor from various Central Asian rulers. According to the custom, the emperor would choose the best jade for himself, generously reimbursing the Kashgarians, and the rest of the jade they would be allowed to sell to Beijing merchants. During this time, Bento also made a side trip to Khotan, where his earlier loan to the principality's queen mother was generously rewarded with jade. The Jesuit impressed the Yarkand-based ruler of Kashgaria, Muhammad Sultan, a descendant of Sultan Sed Khan and a Murad of Koyarishak, with a gift of a mechanical watch, and obtained from him a document for entry into the kingdom of Cialis further east, which was ruled by Muhammad's son. The jade-laden tribute caravan left Yarkand in November 1604. They made a stop in Aksu, Xinjiang, which was still within Kashgarian kingdom, and had Muhammad Sultan's 12-year-old nephew as its nominal ruler. The Jesuit befriended the boy with some sweets and a performance of a European dance, and his mother with a variety of small gifts. The caravan then crossed the desert of Karakathay, or the Black Land of the Cathayans, which, as Bento learned, was surnamed after the Cathayans had lived there for a long time. The next major stop was the small, but strongly fortified city of Cialis, where the travelers spent 3 months, as the caravan's chief waited for more merchants to join. Although it follows from the geography of the route that Cialis had to be located somewhere within today's Mongol Autonomous Prefecture, its identity has been a subject of speculation among later historians. Some thought that it's the city known to us as Korla, while others opined for Karasha, some 50 kilometers farther to the northeast. It was in Cialis that Bento's caravan met with another caravan, returning from Beijing to Kashgaria. As the luck would have it, during the stay in Beijing, Kamblu, in Turkish, the Kashgarians had resided at the same facility for accommodating foreign visitors where Matteo Ricci, the first Jesuit to reach the Chinese Chinese capital, had been detained for a while. The returning Kashgarians told Bento de Goes what they knew about this new, unusual species of visitors to China, and even showed him a piece of scrap paper with something written in Portuguese, apparently dropped by one of the Jesuits, which they had picked as a souvenir to show to the friends back home. Goes was overjoyed, now pretty sure that the China Jesuits had been right identifying Marco Polo's Cathay as China and Cambalu as Beijing. Stuck in Suzhou, via Turpan and Hami, Bento's caravan arrived at the Chinese border at Jiayuguan, and soon obtained the permission to cross the Great Wall and to proceed to Suzhou, the first city within the Ming Empire, which they entered near the end of 1605. After 3 years and 4,000 miles of arduous travel, Bento and Isaac weren't doing too bad. They had 13 horses, 5 hired servants, and 2 boys that Bento had redeemed out of slavery. They carried plenty of precious jade with them, and, most importantly, both travelers were in good health. But here his luck ran out. The Ming Empire had fairly restrictive rules for foreigners' entry into the country, and it would take many months before the Central Asian merchants, ambassadors, would be allowed to proceed into the interior of the country. In the meantime, Bento and Isaac, virtually imprisoned in the border city, had to spend their assets to feed themselves at the exorbitant prices prevailing there. Goës wrote a letter to the Jesuits in Beijing asking them to find a way to get him out of Suzhou, but it wasn't delivered, as he did not know the address of his colleagues in Beijing, and apparently could not even ask anyone to have the letter addressed in Chinese. On their end, the Beijing Jesuits were making inquiries about him from people coming from the west, but could not learn anything either, since they did not know his Armenian name, or maybe just were asking the wrong people. Bento's second letter, sent around the Easter time of 1606, made it to Beijing in mid-November. Despite the winter weather, Ritchie promptly sent a Chinese Jesuit brother named Giovanni Fernandez to his rescue. Despite inclement weather and the theft of many of his supplies by his servant in Xin, Fernandez made it to Suzhou in late March 1607 and found Bento sick, and almost at the point of death. The intrepid traveler died 11 days after Fernandez's arrival, and the other members of his caravan, pursuant to their diabolical custom, divided his property among themselves. It took several months of legal efforts for Giovanni and Isaac to recover some of Bento's property and papers from his former caravan mates. Unfortunately, his travel journal, which he was said to have kept meticulously, had been destroyed by the Saracen caravan people, supposedly because it also contained records of the amounts of funds some of them owed to him. Therefore, our records of his expedition are very sketchy, based primarily on the several surviving letters, and on information obtained by Ritchie from Isaac and Giovanni. Isaac and Giovanni buried Bento in as Christian manner as it was possible under the circumstances, and went to Beijing. After being debriefed by Ritchie during a month's stay in Beijing, Isaac returned to India via Macau and the Strait of Singapore, not without some more adventures on the way. Bibliography.